I started playing PokeRogue on the 26th of March, 2024. To give credit where credit is due, I only found out about PokeRogue because of fellow content creator Thundaga. I just so happened to go on my YouTube homepage right when he started his live stream, PokeRogue is Addicting. I wasn't even subscribed to him or anything, YouTube just so happened to recommend me his live stream. I'm always on the lookout for new Pokemon fan games to play, and seeing the custom logo and character in the thumbnail was enough to catch my interest. Hi everyone, welcome to PokeRogue. This is a battle-focused Pokemon fan game with roguelite elements. At the time, the game barely scratched 100 online players and had a lot less features than it does today. However, the basic concept of battling your way to the top was enough to hook me and the entire Pokemon community. Not long after I posted my first video, the game blew up, and I attribute that success to how accessible the game is. All you have to do is go to PokeRogue.net and create an account. It didn't ask you for your email or anything, just a username and a password. This of course means when there's maintenance or server issues, nobody can play, but that's a small price to pay for accessibility. As of this video's upload, we know that PokeRogue has over 2 million user accounts and at its peak had over 40,000 concurrent players, which is a lot. I've been playing PokeRogue non-stop since March and I've racked up over 400 hours, which has led me to the point that I would consider 100% completion. There's a lot to do in PokeRogue, but what I consider 100% completion is filling out the starter decks, completing all the achievements, and collecting all the vouchers. Now, what I would consider 101% completion would be unlocking all the abilities, passive abilities, hidden abilities, natures, shinies. Yes, there are multiple shiny variants. Perfect IVs, egg moves, ribbons, which basically means you beat the game with it on every single Pokemon. But I don't even know if I'd be able to do that in my lifetime, so 100% completion is gonna have to do. So let's start with the starter deck, since that was the first of the 3 requirements I completed first. Despite there being 1,025 Pokemon in existence as of Generation 9, there are 1,082 Pokemon in PokeRogue, and only 587 of those Pokemon can be chosen on the starter select screen. That's because evolutions of Pokemon have been excluded, except for Pokemon that gain a baby form in later generations like Pikachu and Snorlax. Pokemon like that, however, are unable to start with egg moves or passives and generally cost more to start with and cannot have their cost reduced, so you may as well go with the baby form. What makes the number of Pokemon in PokeRogue higher than the main series is they've separated regional variants as their own Pokemon, as well as the unique Blood Moon Ursaluna and the unreleased AZ's Floette. So even though you technically don't have to catch them all, you still have your work cut out for you because there are a lot of legendary Pokemon, some of which are exclusive to eggs. Finishing the starter decks wasn't something I planned to do. I did it passively as I was playing PokeRogue. Anytime I saw something I didn't have yet, I caught it. Eventually, I realized I only had about 20 Pokemon left to complete my starter decks. At that point, I just grinded as many egg vouchers as I could and got to hatching. You see, there's an egg pity system in PokeRogue. Like any good gacha game, if you strike out enough, PokeRogue will have pity on you and force something new to hatch. I don't even want to imagine how much longer completing my decks would have taken without this system in place. I slowly but surely chipped away at the remaining Pokemon until one day, I hatched the second last Pokemon I needed. Last night, this happened. I got Iron Thorns from an epic egg. We'll come back to that. For now, I want to touch on vouchers. When you defeat a gym leader, Elite Four member, champion, or the more recently added evil team boss, you're rewarded with a voucher. These vouchers can be used to pull eggs from the egg gacha. The first time you beat one of these trainers, it's a 5 pull egg voucher or a 10 pull egg voucher for champions. There's plenty of other ways to obtain egg vouchers, but these vouchers in particular are achievements in their own right. They record the date you first beat the trainer, and I couldn't consider PokeRogue 100% complete unless I had them all. The trouble is actually finding these trainers. Most of it is just RNG. The gym leaders, for example, are tied to the biome that matches their type. Gym leaders in PokeRogue show up every 30 floors, starting on either floor 20 or floor 30. You face a total of 6 per run. One of the last trainers I faced was Claire because firstly, the dragon biome wasteland is super rare. Whenever I did manage to find it, it had to be when I was due to fight a gym leader. Then I had to hope the gym leader at the end was Claire and not Drayden or Raihan. You can control which biome you go to with the map item, but there's also RNG in actually getting the item, and even then it's not guaranteed. To get to the wasteland biome, you have to be coming from the abyss or mountain biome. You then have a 22% chance of going to wasteland, or if you have a map, a 50% chance. Basically, the stars have to align. I wound up getting lucky with the teleporter mystery encounter transferring me to the wasteland biome. When it comes to the Elite Four and champion, whichever generation you face is also random, but you can control it by selecting the mono generation challenge. If you do mono generation 1, you'll face the generation 1 Elite Four and champion. This is actually how I had to unlock the vouchers for generation 4 and generation 8 because I just never faced those Elite Four and champions naturally. I actually had to do mono generation 8 twice in order to face Alistair because Pokemon Sword and Shield have version exclusive gym leaders and Elite Four members. In this case, when you face generation 8, there's a 50-50 if one of the members is B or Alistair. Thankfully, I won the 50-50 on my second attempt. Absolute cinema! You can also obtain these vouchers from the daily run. I personally have completed a grand total of 2 daily runs. I just don't particularly care for that game mode, but it's worth scoping out the daily run chat in the official PokeRogue Discord for any gym leaders you may be missing. It's how I wound up getting my bead voucher. I just couldn't find bead in Fairy Cave for the life of me. Yeah, it's maybe, I don't know. God, I get everyone but Bede! As for the evil teams, as of this video's upload, they are also random. However, they aren't tied to biomes, so if you play the game enough, you'll eventually run into all of them. In total, there are currently 150 vouchers to collect, and thankfully, besides a couple of them, I got most of them by just playing the game. Let's finally discuss achievements. There are currently 71 achievements to complete in PokeRogue. Achievements were meant to be linked to some sort of shop. That's why sandwiched between the title and the date is points. As of now, the only benefit to completing an achievement is bragging rights, and that's all I needed. Like many other things in PokeRogue, a lot of these achievements can be obtained passively in classic mode. However, playing endless mode is required for some, which is a bit more work. They aren't necessarily hard to obtain, just a time investment. Accumulate over $1 million! Finally. Where the real beauty of the achievement system lies is with challenge runs. After beating classic mode for the first time, you'll unlock challenge mode. Challenge mode allows you to enable a modifier that limits you in some way. Firstly, there's the mono type, which restricts you to using one type of Pokemon. There's 18 types, which means there's 18 of these runs to do. The easiest mono type runs for me were Ice, Dark, Psychic, Normal, Flying, Water, and Ground. I beat these on my first try, and something they all have in common is no weakness to Eternatus and Rayquaza's stab types. Currently, it feels like PokeRogue is mostly balanced around how well you can handle Rayquaza and Eternatus. They are the two Pokemon you're guaranteed to see in every run if you get far enough. For example, typically Ice would be a hard mono type to do, but because 2 of the main bosses are weak to Ice, I didn't struggle much at all. The runs where I only failed once were Mono Fairy, Poison, Rock, and Grass. For Mono Fairy, I set myself up for success by bringing Klefki and Darkspawn. Klefki, being a Steel Fairy type, is immune to both of Eternatus' stab moves, leaving Flamethrower as the only thing able to damage it. That's where the fusion mechanic comes in. I got lucky enough to find the DNA Splicer and fused Klefki and Darkspawn. Darkspawn has the ability Well-Baked Body, turning Fire-type damage into a defense buff, ultimately making this Klefki-Darkspawn fusion invincible against the final boss, besides it running out of PP. The funny thing is, Eternatus' passive ability is Neutralizing Gas, an ability that turns off every Pokemon on the field's abilities, which would have completely negated this strategy. But it's too overpowered, so Eternatus is the only boss Pokemon without its passive ability enabled. I'd love to see a hard mode of PokeRogue where every Pokemon you face has passive abilities or something. It would be a good excuse to allow Eternatus to finally be at its full potential. For Monograss, I would typically say despite being weak to Eternatus and Rayquaza, you can make this challenge a lot easier by just using Venusaur and hoping for the Mega Evolution. Venusaur, being part Poison type, protects it from super effective damage from Eternatus' stab poison damage, and its Mega Evolution even gets Thick Bat, which protects Venusaur from super effective fire damage, making all of the final boss's moves neutral rather than 2 of them being super effective. Venusaur also gets Synthesis, a move that heals 50% of the user's health, and Leech Seed, or if you have the egg move, Sappy Seed, which is essentially Leech Seed but better, which does what I like to call turnly damage, but others may refer to it as dots, or damage over time. Turnly damaging moves are great against Eternatus, and not only is Leech Seed turnly damage, it's also healing Venusaur. So the idea is you just sit there and try your best to stay healthy as your other Pokemon chip Eternatus down until you eventually win. However, I already beat the game with Venusaur and I'm stubborn, and I limit myself by only using Pokemon I've never beat the game with before. This is to maximize the number of Pokemon I receive ribbons on when I eventually win a challenge. 6 new Pokemon beating the game gets me 6 new ribbons, which rewards me with 6 5-egg pull vouchers, totaling to 30 new eggs. And as mentioned prior, egg pulling is the best way to fill out your Pokedex passively. It's also just more entertaining for the viewer if I'm using different Pokemon each time. I will confess, however, I did use one Pokemon twice, and it's just because I really enjoyed using it. All of this is to say, I expected Monograss to be really tough, and I thought I might even have to fold on my no reusing Pokemon rule just this once in order to win. To my surprise though, Amoonguss, Eldegoss, and Ferrothorn filled the shoes of Venusaur quite nicely, as Amoonguss shares the same type as Venusaur and its passive ability is Thick Bat. Eldegoss and Ferrothorn had Sappy Seed. Serena was our dedicated Rayquaza counter since it knew Triple Axle. When I'm team building, I almost always have a Pokemon that can outspeed Rayquaza and has Triple Axle. Serena is only base 72 speed, whereas Rayquaza is base 95 and 115 respectively, but Serena can outspeed Rayquaza with a combination of Carbos, Aqua Step, and X speeds. Triple Axle is one of the most consistent ways to take out Rayquaza. Well, when all 3 of them want to land, that is. This thing is annoying. Alright. Don't miss for me, please. Oh, that's awesome, dude. It's super annoying. For this run in particular though, we got lucky against Mega Rayquaza. It had Fly as its stab flying attack instead of Hurricane or Dragon's Ascent, and despite regular Rayquaza having V-Create, it no longer had it in its Mega form, which allowed our Ferrothorn to Iron Barb, Savvy Seed, and Spiky Shield it to death. As for Mono Poison, this run was actually one of my fastest in terms of time to complete. Typically it takes me 2.5 to 3 hours to beat a run, but Mono Poison, despite being a pretty weak type, was over in 1 hour and 50 minutes. And that was all thanks to Venomoth and its passive ability Simple. Simple takes stat boosts and drops and doubles them, so if I Quiver Dance with a Simple Pokemon, I'll get +2/+2/+2 rather than +1/+1/+1. And in Pokemon, doubling even one of your stats is a huge deal, so being able to double 3 of them in one turn allowed Venomoth to make short work of the majority of the run. Not to mention, I also brought along the disgustingly bulky Toxapex, which for some reason learns Leech Seed in this game. As for the remaining Monotype runs, Ghost took me 2 attempts, Electric, Steel, Dragon, and Fighting took me 3 attempts, Fire took me 4 attempts, and Bug took me 17 attempts. I'm sure it's no surprise that I found Mono Bug to be the most difficult. If it wasn't obvious by now, I don't play with retries on, so if I lose, I start from the beginning. Before PokeRogue released the challenge mode modifier, I was doing monotype runs for fun, and in total, I failed Mono Bug 15 times. After challenge mode was released, I only failed twice before securing the win. I still count the previous 15 attempts as failure towards the challenge because by the time the challenge mode was released, I'd perfected my Monobug team, which allowed me to finally win. It was the monotype run that I had to make the most adjustments to my team, which I'm quite stubborn about. I also don't like catching Pokemon, so I pad out my team as much as I can at the start or select screen, meaning I'm typically using lower cost Pokemon. This of course means I don't allow myself to use legendary Pokemon unless I catch them in the wild. It goes without saying, bug types don't do great against Stab Flying from Rayquaza and Eternatus Flamethrower coverage. The way I got around these weaknesses was by choosing specific dual-typed bugs. Araquanid, Centiskorch, and Crustle could take flamethrowers from Eternatus, and as for Rayquaza, I of course had Crustle, as well as a secret second option. You see, despite Bug being defensively weak to some of the best damaging types in the game, it pairs really well with the best defensive type in the game, the Steel type. Steel protects bug types from the flying and rock weakness at the cost of an extra 1 to fire. But that's the only weakness bug steel types have to worry about. There's 6 different bug steel types to choose from, and I of course went with Wormadam. Like I mentioned, I really like padding on my team, and the other options just cost too much. This isn't to say Wormadam is a bad choice though. I actually believe Wormadam is one of the best bug steel types in PokeRogue due to the fact it gets Quiver Dance. In a battle against a real human, as soon as you start setting up, they'll do anything they can to stop you, but in PokeRogue the AI isn't as smart. So, if you position yourself correctly, you can spam Quiver Dance, and as long as there's not too much physical damage, Wormadam actually has quite a bit of staying power, especially if you have the egg move Heal Order. Throughout my many attempts at Mono Bug, Wormadam proved itself time and time again to be a valuable member of the team. Whenever I was in a tough spot, Wormadam could pull back the battle and keep us in the game. Oh, the pain! No super effective moves. That doesn't even one-shot it, dude. Insane. It's fine. Alright, Worm. Okay. I hope you enjoy yourself, Darth. Okay. Oh, I didn't mean to click Bug Buzz. To be fair, I think we had that. Wormadam isn't a foolproof counter to Rayquaza. No Pokemon is really. And the run I beat Mono Bug, Wormadam didn't get the chance to shine against it. But it served me well as one of the 2 Pokemon I had that took neutral damage from flying type moves. Wait! I forgot to take a woman! Just make sure to choose a female Burmy. Because Mono Bug was the first monotype challenge I attempted when the challenge modifier was released, it was before the PokeRogue devs had buffed Eternatus. You see, Eternatus has 2 phases. Its first phase is the base form, and the second phase is its G-Max form. In its base form, Eternatus' moveset used to be Dragon Dance, Sludge Bomb, Eternabeam, and Cosmic Power. Meaning, if you had a Steel Fairy type, you could cheese the first phase of Eternatus and easily set up against it. What I used to do was bring a Steel type and a Fairy type separately and swap them back and forth to drain Eternatus of its Eternabeam PP, since it only had 5, allowing the Steel type to then set up against Eternatus in preparation for the second phase. This of course has been changed since Eternatus now has Flamethrower instead of Dragon Dance in its first stage. That was not the case during my mono bug run though, so using Ribombee and Wormadam, I drained the PP of Eternatus, which allowed me to set up to +6/+6/+6 with Wormadam. Or at least I would have if I didn't mess up. I figured after being fully set up, Wormadam would tank Flamethrowers from Eternatus, but I messed up by picking up 2 dire hits before the battle, turning my crit rate to 50%. While Eternatus was recharging from using Eternabeam, I was doing some damage with Ribombee's Psychic to make Wormadam use less PP when it inevitably had to start damaging it. However, I accidentally took out 2 bars instead of 1 because of the 50% chance to crit. This is the definition of suffering from success. It might be cooked. Cross poisons Nid. Fuck. It was not part of the plan, but it was the plan that worked. Despite this, I still ended up clutching the win, with a crit Psychic from Wormadam finishing off Eternatus. Now, as for why Mono Steel and Mono Dragon took a few attempts, their difficulty lies in the lack of Pokemon with that type. So, I did what I always do and padded my team out at the start. The issue with the Mono Steel team was only 2 of the 5 Pokemon I used were actually Steel types in their base stage, and one of them was Varoom with Slow Start. Once the run actually got going though, it was fairly easy. Mono Dragon shows a lack of available Pokemon because Dragon is such a strong type, the costs of them are quite high, only allowing me to fit 4 Pokemon onto my starting team. 3 of them were usable, but they all evolved quite late. Once I finally was able to get Dratini evolved into Dragonite, the rest of the game was easy, and I even won only using 4 Pokemon since I wasn't able to find any other Dragon types along the way. The type I least expected to struggle with was Mono Electric. Electric types only have one weakness, being Ground, which neither Rayquaza or Eternatus have access to, so I thought for sure it would be one of the easiest types to beat. But it took me the same amount of tries as Mono Fighting, a type that has a huge disadvantage against Rayquaza. The first run was stopped by Eternatus, but it turns out I can't just hope I don't run into any ground types, because the second one was stopped by Elite Four Rika, a ground specialist, and the third one was stopped by Team Magma's Maxi, who has a Groudon. So I added Vikavolt to the team instead of Kilowattrel because it's just bulkier and is also a ground immunity, and it also has Ice Beam. And then we secured our win. Doing the monotype challenges was some of the most fun I had with PokeRogue. It's really rewarding to build a solid team and come out on top only using one type of Pokemon, especially when the odds are stacked against you. Similarly to monotype, there's also monogeneration, which restricts you to using Pokemon from one generation. There's 9 generations, so there's 9 of these runs to do. I beat Generation 1, 4, 6, 8, and 9 on my first attempt. Funnily enough, everyone thought Generation 6 would be the hardest for me to complete because after all my rules and limitations, I only had about 20 Pokemon to choose from. The Generation 1 only run nearly ended at the end of the final Ivy fight, but a little bit of RNG decided I deserved the win. Please just fuck up somehow. Oh. Hold on. What do we have left? A Swallow, dude. Electrode, please. The game's easy, man. Generation 3 I failed twice, and Generation 2 I failed 4 times. Generation 2 is, without a doubt, the hardest generation to do a mono generation run of. The Pokemon just straight up suck, because a lot of them evolve in later generations, or are just straight up baby Pokemon, that also evolve into different generation Pokemon. The way the generation runs work is the generation the Pokemon was introduced is what matters. So even though Togepi is a Generation 2 Pokemon, you can't use it as a Togekiss because Togekiss is Generation 4. Generation 5 and 7 I only failed 1 time before winning. Both times I was confident I would win the first try. The Generation 7 run was going extremely well until I faced Champion How. I just didn't have an answer for an Electric Terrain plus Electric Terra boosted Tabu Koko. So next time, just in case Tabu Koko was there again, I gave my Marowak Lightning Rod. It's got the Koko, which is terrifying. But I've got Lightning Rod, baby! I came prepared! Tries to Nature Madness me, it's fine. Generation 5 was kind of a bullshit loss. I decided to go against my better judgment because of how well the run was going, and I accepted a challenge against a brutal trainer in a mystery encounter, which wound up being 30 plus levels higher than me. I'm all for a challenge, but these fights are way too overtuned. And even one of the people that came up with mystery encounters, Asdar, agrees with me. However, the Generation 5 run was special because it was around this time I had finished my starter decks, meaning I only had 1 more starter Pokemon to catch. The face of PokeRogue Eternatus is the only cost 10 Pokemon, and it's locked behind owning every other starter Pokemon. So, on my winning attempt to Generation 5, instead of having to fight Eternatus, I caught it. I've been playing PokeRogue since like March, April? When it like kind of was first really publicly introduced. And I finally completed my Pokedex. And once you complete your Pokedex in PokeRogue, you can catch Eternatus. You don't need a Master Ball. If you weaken it down to its final bar, you can throw Rogue Balls and Ultra Balls and Great Balls and Pokeballs. It's a pretty easy catch apparently, but I'm going to use a Master Ball because it's just fitting. And you know what? He deserves the full glory of it. You can have the whole thing. Yippee! And with that, we beat all of the Mono-type challenges, Mono-generation challenges, obtained all the vouchers, and even completed our starter decks. So let's talk about the last two challenge modifiers, the Fresh Start Challenge and the Inverse Battle Challenge. Fresh Start acts as if you just created your account and have nothing unlocked, limiting you to only the original starters. Since the game has gotten a lot harder since I first started, this was definitely the hardest challenge to do. You don't realize how strong egg moves and passives are until you can't use them. Not to mention the starter costs were reworked, so the most broken starters cost 4 points, the regular starters cost 3 points, and then Chikorita costs 2 points. I failed this challenge 6 times before getting a win. This run made me see the value in Shedinja. Now what if we used Shedinja? We'll add you to the team if you live. Oh my god, he actually lived. He skillfully dodged and lived. I originally caught it as a throwaway mon, but after terrestrializing it into a water type, it became my main strategy for Rayquaza and Eternatus. And then Inverse Battle basically flips the type chart, so instead of water beating fire, fire now beats water. It's a bit deeper than that, but I'll spare you the details for now. I beat this one on my second try, and only lost my first attempt because I played poorly. It's not too difficult, but it makes you think, and I found it quite fun. If you're interested in seeing how I attempted any of these challenges, I'll leave a playlist in the description. As of this video's upload, there's still some challenge runs to be edited and uploaded, so be patient and they'll eventually all be there. Another achievement worth mentioning is the Bring Your Child to Work Day. If you beat PokeRogue with a not fully evolved party member, you'll unlock this achievement as well as the Eviolite item for your future runs. I personally did this one with Munna during my Mono Psychic run, but there are plenty of not fully evolved Pokemon that are good enough to use the whole way, such as Duraludon, Porygon 2, Dusclops, and Magneton. With all the easy to get achievements, endless achievements, and challenge runs done, that brings us to 70 out of 71 achievements complete. The final achievement is simply known as Breeders in Space. It's a hidden achievement and it's unintentionally one of the hardest achievements to get. The gist of it is there's a new expert breeder mystery encounter and you have to come across and defeat them while you're in one of the rarest biomes, the space biome. All you have to do to get this one is to reach the space biome as often as you can, which most of the time comes down to luck. The better timeline. 40 plus candy, Jesus. Thank you for the $5, that one kid for 20.
My man just said, now we running it back.
Guys?
Are you fucking kidding me? What's going on? At this point in my adventure, I've completed my starter decks, got every voucher, beat every challenge run, and completed every other achievement. All that stands in my way of 100% completion is some RNG. To make this worth my while, I decided to go above and beyond and start completing my Pokedex while trying to get this rare achievement. I was 36 Pokemon off, and since I already had all the starters, all I had to do was evolve anything I was missing. There isn't currently a way to see which Pokemon you're missing in game, but thanks to Damo looking through my save file, I got a list. I wound up finishing my Pokedex before I found Breeders in Space, so all that was left to do was play the game until they showed up. And that's where we are today. No, it's not. I was originally going to upload this video as 99.9% done with PokeRogue because I didn't want to keep delaying it. However, on the day I finished editing and was ready to post, I was notified that they were making Breeders in Space easier to obtain. In the late hours of the 3rd of December, PokeRogue dropped an update that changed a fair few things, but most importantly to me was the Breeders in Space and the map update. The map is easier to obtain now, which makes getting Breeders in Space a little less painful. So I got to chasing it right away. My plan was just to use Kartana to sweep and hope I found the map early enough to take me to Lake, which would then bring me to Swamp, then Graveyard, then Abyss, then flip a coin for the 50-50 chance of going to Space. I'd say on average I was doing space checks every 20 to 30 minutes. Then, if we got to Space and didn't get the Expert Breeder or the regular breeders, we'd continue to Ancient Ruins, then to Mountain, and then have a 33% chance of going back to Space. If we got Space, check for breeders, and if nobody was there, reset and try again. I did this for a couple hours after the update came out when finally, it happened. There's no way it happens like this. I don't even know if any of these guys can beat, I'll be honest. Okay, this is stupid. This is why I kept bringing more than just Kartana. Because I was like, it just gives me another... Are you f***ing... What is happening? Okay, okay, that's a shiny? Okay. Oh my god, dude. It's so funny to me that I basically waited a month for this update to get breeders in space easier just to wind up getting it the original way. So there you have it. As anticlimactic as it was, I finally got achievement 71 and I have 100% completed PokeRogue. It should be noted that PokeRogue is a constant work in progress. They haven't even added all of the moves and abilities to the game, and not every Pokemon has 3 shiny variants yet. And I know there will be new achievements and vouchers added after I post this video, and I'll pick up the game again and unlock those too. But as for now, I'm closing the PokeRogue chapter. Thank you everyone that stuck by me during most of 2024 where this game took over my life. I hope you guys enjoy what I have in store for you next.